we were as a nation. And the terrorists wanted to bring those towers down. So now all this is really coming in my head like, wow, this is happening. I turned around and I picked up a payphone. How many of you kids remember what a payphone is? Anybody know a payphone? It's like a dinosaur nowadays, right? But I picked up a payphone and I got through to my wife, Allison, because I always made a point to call her. And I got through and she said, what's going on? I said, I'm not sure, but a plane had run into the World Trade Center. Now, even back then in 2001, which for us seems like yesterday, but for you guys it's history. Back then, we knew an airliner would not accidentally slam into the World Trade Center. So we knew there were terrorists. As I'm talking to my wife, our inspector came in and said, we commandeered a bus on 9th Avenue. We're going down to the World Trade Center, which is owned and operated by the Port Authority, and we have a command there to help our fellow officers evacuate. I remember telling my wife, I got to go. I hung up the phone. Myself, Dominic Pizzulo, another officer, got on the bus with 20 more of our officers. Sergeant McLaughlin got in a police Suburban. And sometimes it takes a little bit of time to get from the middle of Manhattan to downtown Manhattan. But on that morning, we flew. And as we're on the bus, like I told you, it's still high school. Guys are still joking around, still trying to figure out what's going on. We got about 2 city blocks back from the World Trade Center. That's when the bus went silent. As we looked down one street, 2 city blocks back, we saw a man who had been hit by something. He was bleeding. An FDNY ambulance was working on him, and that's when we knew this was serious. You know, to me, the man looked like he didn't make it. We went one more block facing the World Trade Center on Vesey Street. We started getting out. There was a bunch of us. There was a bunch of firefighters. We were holding back. And from that point where we stopped to the World Trade Center, it looked like a war zone. There was nothing there. That's when I saw Sergeant McLaughlin coming running through that block with the other sergeant, the inspector, and they came up to us and they asked for volunteers. They said, I need volunteers. I knew how to use Scott air packs. Again, we're Port Authority police officers, but we know how to use firefighter gear. So I remember, I don't know who said it first, Dominic, myself, and another officer, Antonio Rodriguez. Antonio had 4 years on the NYPD, and he also came over for better benefits and pay. And the 3 of us said, well, we just graduated the academy in January. We know how to use Scott air packs. Sergeant McLaughlin said, let's go. So at that point, we start running. Where does courage come from, kids? Does anybody know where courage comes from? Anybody? From where? Okay. So I want you guys to remember this. You know where courage comes from? It comes from overcoming your fears. There's not a person here, whether it's a police officer, firefighter, EMT, your parents, that haven't felt fear in their life. And how you'll become courageous is by overcoming those fears. And I got to tell you, as we're running toward those buildings, I'm scared. I had a lot of fear in my heart because as we're running toward the buildings, there's nothing but debris, parts of the plane, parts of concrete, and unfortunately remains of human beings. So think about that. But then I remember I took an oath to serve and protect. People were dependent on us. I looked at Dominic, I looked at Antonio, and I could see concern in their face too, but we were a team. And we went forward. We got to the building 5. Sergeant McLaughlin said, Jimeno, take our equipment, our hats, our PR-24s, our memo books, throw them in the Suburban I left on the corner of Church and Vesey. They were going into what's called E-rooms. E-rooms are set up throughout the World Trade Center, emergency rooms that have Scott air packs. Those are the tanks you see the firefighters wear, bunker codes, so we can address whatever situation is happening in the buildings. I went up to the corner of Church and Vesey, came around the corner, and you guys know how big a Chevy Suburban is, right? Big Suburban, your parents probably have a lot of them. The front end of that truck was just flattened out. That's when I realized, hey, dummy, there's stuff falling from the sky because the concrete was coming down. So I backed up, but when I looked down Church Street, I saw thousands of people being herded out like cattle out of the other building. What we didn't know was when we left the bus terminal, a second plane had hit while we were going down there. So I never saw the gaping hole of the other building. Ran into and got in with Sergeant McLaughlin. We put on our Scott air packs. We promised each other we wouldn't leave each other. We went downstairs to the police desk. That's where we met another officer, Christopher Amoroso. Chris had been transferred from the bus terminal to the World Trade Center 3 weeks before the attacks. And Chris was a great cop. There's a saying we have, I'll go through a door with you. That means you trust somebody with your life that you will go through a door no matter what's on the other side of that door. And that's the kind of guy Chris was. when we saw Christopher down there, he had an injury to his left eye. We asked him what happened. He goes, I got hit with something. So a piece of concrete or something hit him in the eye. But he had already saved several people. There's a famous picture of Christopher Amoroso that a Daily News photographer took on that day of him running with the lady and another gentleman helping. That was the last time he was seen before we met him. So at that point, we became a team of 5. Sergeant McLaughlin said, Jimeno, grab a mail cart. There was a canvas mail cart. And we started loaded with more gear. And now we're going back up into the World Trade Center. So the World Trade Center, kids, were 2 large buildings. They were connected by a mall level. And each mall level would have a lobby. Lobby 1, lobby 2. And you would take the PATH train downstairs. And again, it's just the mall level. As we came out into the mall level, this is something I want you to remember. I saw water on the ground. There was about 2 inches of water on the ground. I seen people who were hurt. I heard people yelling. But I'll tell you what I saw on 9/11. I saw a lot of love that day. A lot of love. Because as we're walking out, there's a steady flow of people come from building 1 in a single file line, helping each other. I remember seeing a black gentleman and a white gentleman carrying a blonde woman who had a severe cut on her leg. They were carrying her. And total strangers were helping each other. And I thought to myself, if these civilians can be this brave, us in uniform have to be 3 notches above them. But I saw a lot of love that day. Something the terrorists didn't expect. They didn't expect that the United States of America, the Americans, and every human being in those buildings that day to stand up and help each other. And that's what we were doing. No matter how bad it was, we were helping each other. So we continued on, and we went on to building 2, which again, I still thought building 1's under distress, but I trusted my sergeant. He said, we're gonna go to building 2 to get more equipment. They went downstairs. I stayed with the cart. And that's when another officer, Bruce Reynolds, came walking up to me. Bruce was from the George Washington Bridge. I kind of knew him from the newspaper growing up because he had stopped people from jumping off the George Washington Bridge. And he walked up to me and he said, you know, today's going to be a long day, but we'll get a lot of people home, kid. And as a young rookie, I needed that. A senior officer giving me that strength. He walked away. That'd be the last time I see Bruce Reynolds. He died when the building